Hi, this is Bill, and this is Progpaganda. In our last episode, we pursued some discussion of the band Roxy Music, in particular covering their first 2 years of existence in 1971 through 73, when the great Brian Eno was a member of the band. We're going to continue in this episode with discussion of Roxy Music's middle period from late 1973 until the spring of 1976, when the band went on hiatus for a little over 2 years. A significant change in Roxy Music's lineup and presentation was made in late 1973. Brian Eno left the band in order to pursue a solo career, and also would extend that in the years that followed into a career in record production. Eno's replacement in Roxy Music was Eddie Jobson. Eddie Jobson was only 18 years old when he joined Roxy Music, but he was already a virtuoso on the keyboards and synthesizer and on the violin. He was a terrific musician who had already, to a certain degree, established himself in the British music press prior to joining Roxy through a brief tenure in the progressive rock band Curved Air. With Jobson's joining Roxy, which already had among its ranks the great guitar player Phil Manzanera, the oboe and saxophone player Andy Mackay, and the great drummer Paul Thompson, Roxy now had tremendous firepower to back their vocalist and band leader Bryan Ferry. This, in some regards, was a bit ironic. When Brian Eno left Roxy Music in late 1973, it was in part because both Bryan Ferry and the band's management at EG Records were a bit concerned that Brian Eno's flamboyant stage presence overshadowed Ferry's on stage. Ferry was obviously groomed as the band's leader, as well as their lead singer and their primary songwriter. With the very strong band now backing Ferry on stage, and the great success that Roxy had achieved with their first 2 albums, the various members of the band were interested in furthering their careers through songwriting and a bit more notoriety in the press as well. Towards that end, over the course of the band's next 3 albums, Stranded, Country Life, and Siren, there would be an uptick in the participation of the various band members in the band's songwriting, with some of the band's more notable songs being co-authored by Bryan Ferry with other members of the band. In particular, the great song, A Song for Europe, from the Stranded album, is a co-write with Andy Mackay. Mackay provides most of the music for that song. From Country Life, the song that would become the most enduring would be one co-written by Ferry and Phil Manzanera, Out of the Blue. Out of the Blue is an interesting track. It borrows a little bit in its structure from Roxy's earlier song from For Your Pleasure, In Every Dream Home a Heartache. But the embellishment that the instrumentation provides on this song is hard to ignore. The bass part in the studio provided by John Gustafson is exceptionally tasty, and the studio version and subsequent live versions of the song would contain wonderful work in its closing from Eddie Jobson on the violin. Jobson's violin work on this song in live performance would often be a highlight of Roxy's shows going forward during the 70s. Then came Siren, which I would view as the masterpiece created by this version of the band. It is an excellent record. Like For Your Pleasure before it, there isn't a band song on it. But this album also is notable because of the many songs that are co-writes between Ferry and the various musicians in the band. On Stranded, out of that album's 8 songs, 3 are co-writes either between Ferry and Manzanera or Ferry and Mackay. That extended to 4 songs out of the 10 songs that were on Country Life. Siren, which contained 9 songs, had 5 songs on it that were co-writes. 2 by Ferry and Manzanera, 2 by Ferry and Mackay, and 1 by Ferry and Eddie Jobson, the first and only co-write that Jobson would have while a member of Roxy. The album opens with Love is the Drug, the song that is probably the best known song from the album to American audiences, and which was a fairly substantial hit single in most geographies in the world. By 1975, the disco era had pretty much launched worldwide. Disco music was all over American radio, and European flavors of it were getting a significant amount of play both on radio and in the clubs in Great Britain as well. Love is the Drug, as well as another song from Siren, Both Ends Burning, were quite disco flavored, making Roxy one of the first British bands to really get into this trend in a large way. They weren't the first. David Bowie beat them by several months with his Young Americans album, and the Stones would be right behind Roxy Music with their early 1976 release, Black and Blue. But Roxy Music definitely was willing to embrace the disco trend and did so on those 2 songs, which are among the best known from the record. That said, there are some other wonderful songs from Siren. End of the Line, the second song on the album, which follows Love is the Drug, is a showcase for Eddie Jobson on violin, and begins for the first time to show the romantic side of Roxy Music's repertoire in a fairly big way. In Roxy's early music, a significant amount of Ferry's presentation and his lyrics tended towards his role as the bon vivant, the playboy on stage. Beginning on the Siren album with End of the Line, and with other songs from the album, including Could It Happen to Me and the final song on the album, Just Another High, we're starting to see a different side of Ferry, the man who can have everything, probably have any woman he wants, but when he finds a woman he wants to keep in his life, has trouble holding on to her. It's a theme that began showing up on this album and would continue in a very big way in the latter period of the band in the late 70s and early 80s. The third song on side 1 of the album, Sentimental Fool, is a powerful song with great instrumental participation across the band. Jobson and Manzanera dominate the beginning of the song, which sounds like it could have very easily been produced as part of the ambient music that Brian Eno, in partnership with Robert Fripp, was pursuing around this time. The song itself, when the lyrics finally begin, about 2 minutes or so in, is a powerful one, again exploring Ferry's romantic themes, but doing it now with a heavy backbeat. Paul Thompson's drumming is masterful on this track. Other songs from the album include Nightingale, a co-write between Ferry and Manzanera. She Sells, the co-write between Ferry and Jobson, effectively features Jobson's work at the back end of the track, a great violin solo that follows a very prominent piano throughout the song. Siren is a great album throughout, and for people who are not fans of Roxy Music, I would go so far as to say it's probably due to the presence of the familiar songs Love is the Drug and Both Ends Burning that it probably would be the best place to begin exploring the Roxy catalog. Siren first, probably then For Your Pleasure, and then the other 3 albums from the band's early days. Roxy Music, in the spring of 1976, after releasing a live album, Viva Roxy Music, would go on hiatus for about 2.5 years, regrouping in 1978 and relaunching their recorded music career in mid-1979 with the album Manifesto. We'll review Manifesto and the rest of Roxy Music's late 70s and early 80s catalog in our next episode. As always, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please click like, and of course feel free to subscribe as we continue our journey through Roxy Music and across other bands in the progressive music space. Thanks again. Take good care. Bye-bye.